a millionaire CEO, follow his maid after work. But what he found left him speechless. Before we begin, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. And once the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. She said she was just the maid. He never trusted anyone. Not after what happened. Not after the last housekeeper walked out with his grandmother's diamond brooch and a forged check. Not after the girlfriend before that, who smiled sweetly and drained his account like a leaking pipe. So when Marcus Wellington, a man who built tech empires and trust funds, noticed his maid leaving work early, whispering on the phone in Spanish and hiding strange receipts, he didn't ask. He followed. That night, as her bus wheezed through the streets of Seattle, he tailed it 3 cars back. His heart beat louder than the tires on wet pavement. She didn't go to a jewelry store. She didn't meet a man. She walked into a rundown building with faded lettering. Centro Esperanza. Marcus parked, stayed in the shadows, and through dusty windows, he saw her Sophia Morales, his quiet, invisible maid, standing in front of a room full of elderly immigrants, teaching English, smiling in a way he'd never seen, alive, kind, brilliant. Later, she unpacked those grocery bags he questioned earlier. Not for herself, she made plates of food for the students' fruit, crackers, simple sandwiches. She laughed with them. She spoke their language. She loved them. And Marcus, the billionaire, with a fortress for a home, stood outside in the cold and felt the first crack in his armor. She wasn't stealing. She was giving and giving and giving, all while he paid her barely enough to survive. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat in his office, surrounded by glass and silence, thinking about the warmth in that crumbling center, about her smile, about the truth he never imagined he'd find. He thought she was a thief, but she was the one person who still believed in kindness, even when no one was watching. And for the first time in 15 years, Marcus Wellington, CEO, billionaire, guarded to the bone, whispered to himself, she was never just the maid. He always noticed details. The way his coffee cooled exactly 4 degrees every minute. The quiet click of the security lock when the front door closed. The soft hum of his office computer, even on sleep mode. Marcus Wellington paid attention because he had to. When your world was built on wealth, one loose thread could unravel everything. So when Sophia Morales started leaving early, when she said, "It's my mother, she's sick," and avoided eye contact, Marcus noticed when she smiled too politely, carried grocery bags too tightly, and declined his offer to install a driver for safety. He noticed the receipt in her jacket pocket said she wired $500 to Honduras. The call in Spanish that ended with más dinero, more money. The 20-minute break spent browsing jewelry that cost more than she made in 6 months. He noticed it all, and he didn't ask. He watched. She'd worked for him 8 months. Polite, efficient, quiet. Not once did she linger in a room longer than she had to. Not once did she speak about herself unless prompted. But now, something didn't fit. David, he'd said into the phone that night, run a background check on her. His assistant sighed. Tired of playing this game. She's clean. Marcus, not everyone's out to rob you. But Marcus wasn't looking for reassurance. He was looking for evidence. And when he found none, it only deepened the itch beneath his skin. The same one he felt before Jennifer betrayed him. Before Eric falsified those documents. Before that investor smiled and sank the deal with a handshake. He knew the signs. And Sophia was starting to show them. So he waited until Thursday. She'd texted him casually at 6:41 p.m. Working late tonight, don't wait up. But he hadn't given her any evening duties. He stood by the front window of his penthouse, fingers curled around a glass of scotch, watching the city lights blur beyond the rain-streaked glass. Then he grabbed his keys. He followed the 47 bus for 26 minutes, keeping 3 cars back. He told himself it was about due diligence, about protecting his estate, about learning from past mistakes. But the truth sat deeper. He didn't know her, and that terrified him more than any missing asset ever could. She stepped off in Pioneer Square. Wind caught her braid and tugged at her thin coat. She moved quickly, cradling her bags as if they held something precious. Marcus parked across the street, ducked his head beneath the brim of his coat, and followed. She entered a cracked glass door beneath a flickering sign, Centro Esperanza, Center of Hope. He paused at the edge of the building. Rain tapped softly on his sleeves, and through the window, he saw her, not cleaning, not stealing, not lying, teaching, to a room full of gray-haired immigrants with notebooks in their hands and hope in their eyes. Sophia stood before them, smiling brighter than he'd ever seen, saying, "Tonight, we'll practice ordering food at a restaurant. I want you to feel confident. I want you to feel ready." Marcus stood frozen. He watched her kneel beside an older man struggling with pronunciation, gently guiding his tongue to the right syllable. He saw her offer a quiet squeeze to a frustrated woman, whispering words of encouragement in Spanish. Then, the bags. She unpacked them. Sandwiches, fruit, crackers. She hadn't bought groceries for herself. She'd bought dinner for them. And as the group gathered to eat, laughing softly, reaching across tables, Sophia sat in the center of it all, not as a leader, not as a maid, but as someone who belonged. Marcus stumbled backward into the dark. Everything he thought he knew about her, about trust, about goodness tilted, the jewelry browsing, the phone calls, the wire transfer, they all made sense now, just not in the way he was prepared to understand. She wasn't taking from him. She was giving to the world, and somehow she was doing it invisibly. Right under his roof, he had followed her to catch a lie. Instead, he found the truth, and it undid him. Chapter 1. The Cleaner Who Lied. Marcus Wellington didn't believe in coincidences. Not anymore. Not after Jennifer. Not after the assistant who rewired his accounts. Not after the security guard who sold information to the press and still smiled at him every morning. He had built a billion-dollar empire by recognizing patterns, spotting shifts in tone, calculating risk in voices and glances. People lied with their eyes before their mouths ever opened. And now, Sophia Morales was blinking too much. He noticed it 2 weeks ago. "Family emergency," she'd said softly, avoiding his gaze while packing her things early for the 3rd time that month. "My mother's not well." He let her go, not because he trusted her, but because he didn't want to reveal how closely he was watching. And then came the jewelry, diamond studs, tennis bracelets, pear-shaped rubies. She wasn't buying them. No, she was browsing. During her lunch breaks, in the corner of his living room, where the Wi-Fi was strongest, her eyes lingered on pieces that cost more than her annual salary. So when she texted, working late on a night when he'd specifically told her to take the evening off, he didn't respond. He simply followed. The rain painted long lines down his windshield as the 47 bus hissed to a stop in Pioneer Square. Sophia stepped off, braid damp, coat clinging to her frame. She didn't look around, just walked forward, head down, like she had somewhere she needed to be and nowhere else to fall back on. Marcus trailed behind, heart pounding in a rhythm he hadn't felt since he was 21, and pitching his first startup to a table of VCs who wanted to eat him alive. She turned the corner and pushed through the doors of a crumbling building with faded lettering, Centro Esperanza. He parked, waited, and then approached the window quietly. Inside, Sophia smiled, but not the soft, apologetic smile she gave him. when she forgot to dust the top shelf. This was different. Alive. She stood in front of 20 elderly men and women, all clutching notebooks and pencils like lifelines. She greeted them in Spanish, then switched seamlessly to English, saying, "Tonight we're practicing how to ask for a menu. Who remembers how to say table for two?" A frail man raised his hand shyly. She helped him with the phrase. She clapped when he got it right. She knelt beside a woman, struggling with the pronunciation of lemonade, her hand resting gently on the woman's shoulder as she repeated it with patience and grace. Marcus didn't move. Couldn't this woman, who mopped his floors and wiped down his marble counters, this woman he suspected of theft, was here in the dark, after work, teaching English to a room full of forgotten people. He watched for over an hour. After class ended, she unpacked the grocery bags he'd questioned earlier that morning. Fruit, sandwiches, crackers. She prepared small plates for each student, chatting and laughing in both languages as she passed them out. She sat at their side, not above them, and shared her meal as if she had all the time in the world. She wasn't paid for this. She wasn't supervised. No applause waited for her at the end of the night. And yet, she stayed. She smiled. She gave. Marcus turned away from the window as his throat tightened. He didn't drive home right away. He sat in his car for 20 minutes, engine off, hands trembling lightly on the steering wheel. He thought of the wire transfer, the $500 he found on a crumpled receipt in her coat. It hadn't been a cover story. It was for her mother's medical treatment. In Honduras, the jewelry browsing, maybe it wasn't a plan. Maybe it was just a dream. The kind a person has when they know they'll never touch it. The kind that hurts to look at, but heals to imagine. And the phone call, más dinero, more money, not for her, for them. That night, back in his fortress of glass and steel, Marcus opened his laptop and typed Centro Esperanza, Seattle. He scrolled through the website slowly. Programs for immigrant families, ESL classes, legal aid, community meals, job training, childcare, all free, all volunteer-based. Then he saw her, photo after photo. Sophia organizing food drives, leading English classes, reading to children, and in every image, she glowed. He clicked on the financial reports. The center was operating month to month. Donations barely covered rent. Repairs were overdue. Several programs had recently been cut. He closed his laptop and sat in silence for a long time. The walls of his penthouse had never felt so hollow. The wealth he'd guarded so ruthlessly had never felt so wasted. The next afternoon, he made an anonymous donation, $50. 01 cent, enough to keep the lights on, enough to save the programs, enough to give her, and those she loved, a little more time. He used a shell company and an untraceable alias. He didn't want her to know. He just wanted to help. The next morning, Sophia nearly dropped the vacuum when she burst into the kitchen, cheeks flushed with joy. Someone donated, she gasped. 50,000. Anonymous. Can you believe it? Marcus looked up from his coffee and blinked slowly. That's remarkable, he said quietly. Her eyes sparkled. We can fix the heater now. We can buy new textbooks, Maria cried when I told her. He smiled behind his cup. Sophia turned back to her cleaning cart, still buzzing with happiness, her joy filling the cold kitchen like sunlight. And Marcus, he felt something shift deep in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Not suspicion, not calculation, but warmth. In the days that followed, he found reasons to be in the same room when she worked. He emerged from his office for coffee just as she was dusting the windows. He opened his emails on the kitchen island while she prepared his lunch. They talked. Not much, but enough. She told him about her mother, her studies, her thesis on economic inequality, her dream of creating programs that help people climb without losing their dignity. He listened, and the more he listened, the less he thought of her as the maid, and more as the one person in his life who asked for nothing, yet gave him everything without knowing it. But the guilt grew, too. She still didn't know he'd followed her, still didn't know who saved the center, still didn't know she'd changed his life. She still thought he believed her to be nothing more than what she'd always said, just a cleaner. But Marcus knew now. She was the one person in his world who wasn't lying, and he'd been the one hiding all along. What if the person you misjudged the most turns out to be the one who was always quietly saving you? Chapter 2. The real her. She didn't know he had seen her. She had no idea that the man sipping black coffee at the marble kitchen island had followed her through Seattle's rain-drenched streets and watched her make sandwiches for people whose names he'd never hear. To Sophia Morales, Mr. Wellington was still the same, cold, clipped, and unreadable. His shirts were always perfectly pressed. His voice never rose. His gaze never lingered. But that week, something changed. He lingered. At first, she thought she imagined it, a coincidence, perhaps. But by Thursday, she noticed. He timed his coffee breaks with her vacuuming schedule. He stopped working in his study and started using the kitchen table always just as she entered with the mop. One morning, she caught him watching her hands as she carefully dusted the edge of a bookshelf. "You missed a spot," he said softly, not pointing at the shelf, but at a photograph tucked behind a stack of old leather-bound books. A forgotten picture of his parents, she guessed. Their eyes warm, their smiles young. She reached for it and hesitated. "Do you want me to clean it?" He looked away, the smile fading. "No, just leave it." She did, and for the first time, she realized this house might be full of ghosts. The following Monday, she arrived early, too early. She had a thesis meeting at the university and wanted to make up the time. He found her in the kitchen, hunched over textbooks and scribbled notes. "Good morning," he said. Startled by her presence, Sophia jumped, nearly knocking her tea over. "I'm so sorry. I came in early to make up the hours. I didn't want to be behind." "What are you working on?" he asked, genuinely curious. She blinked. No one ever asked. "My thesis," she said cautiously. "I'm finishing my degree in social policy. I'm researching how language access, job training, and stable housing help break the poverty cycle in immigrant communities." Marcus pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "You're studying all that while working 3 jobs." She looked down, embarrassed. "It's slow. I take online classes at night. I clean here. I work at the store on weekends. And then the center in the evenings. I sleep when I can." His fingers tapped against his coffee mug. "And you still find time to make sandwiches for your students." She froze. The words echoed like footsteps in an empty hall. What? "I followed you," he said simply. "Last week. I thought you were stealing. I thought you were lying to me." Silence fell like ash. "I'm sorry," he added, his voice quieter, "but I needed to know." Sophia sat back in her chair, breath caught between fury and heartbreak. "So you spied on me. I thought you were like the others," he said. "I've been robbed, lied to, manipulated. Everyone always wants something. And I thought you were just better at hiding it." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. "And now?" she asked. "Now," Marcus said slowly, "I think you're the only good person I've ever met." She didn't speak to him the rest of the morning, but she didn't quit. Not yet. By that afternoon, she was back in the kitchen, folding laundry and humming under her breath. Marcus lingered in the doorway, unsure if he was welcome. "Why do you do it?" he asked finally. "The center, the groceries, teaching." She paused, the edge of a towel in her hand. I came to this country with my mother when I was 14. She worked 2 jobs. I didn't know English. We were scared. Invisible. But one woman, a teacher, used to stay after class and tutor me. She taught me how to say, "May I help you?" and "Thank you." And "We're going to be okay." She smiled faintly. That woman saved my life. Marcus leaned against the doorframe. "So now you're trying to save someone else's." "I'm not saving anyone," she said. "I just want to make it easier for someone." Later that week, Marcus sat alone in his office and scrolled through the Esperanza Community Center's donation list. He clicked again. Another $10, Fivolak, labeled in support of Sophia's literacy program, still anonymous. The next day, news broke of the center's expansion. New computers, new programs, a renovated kitchen, and in the photos posted online, Sophia was beaming as she cut the ribbon with a room full of laughing children. He printed the photo and tucked it into the drawer beside his watch collection. She didn't know. She didn't need to. That weekend, over chamomile tea in the kitchen, Sophia laughed at something he said about a failed business pitch from his 20s. "You failed," she teased, eyebrow raised. "Hard. I pitched an app that translated dog barks. Investors laughed me out of the room," she snorted. "Please tell me the name," he winced. "Bark Talk." Sophia nearly spilled her tea. It was the first time Marcus realized how beautiful her laugh was. Warm, human, unscripted. He reached across the table before he could stop himself. "I'd like to offer you a new job," he said. "Full-time. Manage the household. Higher salary. Health benefits. Paid time off." Sophia's smile faded. "Why?" "Because you're the most competent person I've ever hired, and the only one I trust." She looked down at her tea. I need to think about it." "Of course." But Marcus saw the flicker in her eyes, and he knew. Money wasn't what she wanted. Purpose was. That night, she stood at the back of the community center, her arms full of donated textbooks, the evening wind brushing strands of hair into her eyes. Maria, one of her students, hugged her and said in Spanish, "Mia, you light up this place." Sophia smiled, but her heart was heavy. The job Marcus offered would change everything. More money, stability, time for school, but also less time for this. Less time with the people who reminded her why she'd come to this country at all. Back at the mansion, Marcus stared at the folder on his desk, labeled Sophia Morales, Household Manager Contract. Then he opened a blank document and began to type. "Sophia, I know we come from different worlds, but I see yours now, and I hope someday you'll let me be a part of it." He didn't finish the letter. He never sent it. But his heart had already written every word. The world calls some people ordinary. But maybe the real miracle is when someone sees you and finally understands. You were never ordinary at all. Chapter 3. The deal. For 2 days, she avoided him. Not entirely. Sophia still cleaned the kitchen counters, folded the linens, organized the books in his study with careful precision. But she didn't linger. She didn't laugh. And every time Marcus entered the room, she left a second too soon. He noticed. Of course he noticed. She was the one quiet presence in his life that didn't blur into the background. He missed the sound of her voice explaining how language access changes a family's future. Missed the way her eyes flickered when she spoke about Carlos, the construction worker who learned to read safety signs. Missed her. And now, silence, all because of the job offer. He caught her by the stairwell, arms full of fresh towels, hair falling loose from the braid she usually wore like armor. "Sophia, wait." She stopped, not because he was her boss, but because something in his voice cracked a little. I didn't mean to pressure you," Marcus said quietly. "If the offer was too much, too fast, you can forget it." She looked at him then, really looked, and the wall between them softened just a little. "It's not that," she whispered. "It's just—" He waited. "I've worked so hard to live on my terms," she continued, "to keep my world small enough to hold on to. If I say yes, everything changes." He nodded slowly. "Is that such a bad thing?" "Maybe not for you," she said, "but for me, it might mean giving up the only things that ever felt like mine." That night, Marcus sat at the dining room table with a pen in his hand and a contract untouched beside his scotch. He didn't drink. He didn't move. He just listened to the emptiness, the echo of what wasn't there. Sophia's laughter, her quiet strength, the warmth she brought without even trying. And he thought to himself, what if giving her more means taking away what makes her who she is? Saturday morning, Sophia stood at the kitchen counter, chopping vegetables for the week's meals. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down and smiled a message from Maria. First English test passed. I remembered how to say table for four. She chuckled softly. The kind of pride that didn't need acknowledgement. Just knowing they were growing was enough. Marcus entered quietly. No suit jacket, sleeves rolled up. More man, less CEO. You have a glow when you talk about your students, he said gently. Sophia paused. They matter. They remind me why I'm here. Then maybe the real deal, he said, is this: I keep your current hours. I raise your salary. No strings, no control. You work here when it fits your life, not the other way around. She turned to him, eyebrows raised. And what do you get? He smiled faintly. I get to keep seeing the real you. She didn't answer then. But that night, she sat at the edge of her bed, knees drawn to her chest, phone in hand, staring at her budget spreadsheet. Rent, tuition, mom's medication, food. Even with 3 jobs, it never balanced. The new offer, it would fix everything. But her time at the center would shrink. Her studies would slow. Her life would shift towards someone else's orbit. And then what? Who would she become? Sunday afternoon, Marcus returned from a rare lunch with David and found a note on the kitchen counter. It wasn't on formal stationery. It wasn't typed. Just a folded piece of paper, ink in delicate, careful handwriting. Thank you for believing in me. I've thought about your offer. I'm honored, but I can't accept. He read it twice, then again, and again. She'd said no, not because she didn't need it, but because she knew who she was and wouldn't trade that in for comfort. The next day, she came into work as usual. No tension, no awkward silence, just Sophia focused, soft-spoken, humming under her breath as she cleaned the windows. He watched her for a long moment. You're brave, he said. She looked up. For turning down a job? No, he said. For knowing what matters. Most people don't. She shrugged. I've had to survive a lot of things, but I don't want to just survive anymore. Then what do you want? She hesitated. Then, very softly, a life I'm proud of. That night, Marcus sat alone in his study. He reached for the folder containing the contract and quietly slid it into the bottom drawer. He wasn't disappointed. He was in awe. She had turned down a life of luxury for purpose. He'd never known anyone like her. And maybe, just maybe, she was what he needed to remember who he once was before the fear, the lawsuits, the betrayals, before he built walls instead of homes. Some people chase power, others chase comfort, but the rarest souls, they choose purpose, even when it costs them everything. Chapter 4. The ghost in her chest. Sophia had a rhythm. She moved through the mansion like she was gliding across water, silent, sure-footed, invisible when she wanted to be. It was the kind of silence that spoke of years learning how to shrink herself in rooms that were too loud, how to hold her breath in homes that didn't want her voice, how to disappear before anyone could ask too many questions. Marcus noticed it more now, the way she paused in the hallway before entering a room, as if checking whether she belonged, the way she folded towels with military precision, as if proving something with every crease, the way she always stood near the exit, as if she might be asked to leave at any moment. She lived with her heart packed tightly behind her ribs, like a letter never mailed. And Marcus, he was starting to feel the weight of the envelope. On a gray Wednesday morning, rain smearing the windows with long streaks of sorrow, he found her standing still in the foyer, not cleaning, not organizing, just standing there, one hand pressed gently against her chest. "Sophia," she startled. I was just taking a minute," she said quickly, stepping back as if she'd been caught stealing air. "Are you all right?" She nodded, but her eyes didn't. Marcus stepped closer. "Tell me the truth." Her mouth opened, then closed, and then finally she exhaled. "My mother called. The doctors in Honduras. They don't know if she'll make it through the next surgery." Marcus's stomach tightened. "She's in pain," Sophia whispered, "and I'm here, folding sheets and wiping down counters while she's hurting." "You're here," he said gently, "because you're trying to build a better life for her. That's not failure, Sophia. That's sacrifice." She blinked, the tears glassing over but not falling. I feel like I'm always choosing between people, between my mother, my students, myself." Marcus didn't touch her, but he wanted to. "You don't have to choose with me," he said. "You don't have to prove anything." That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat in his home office, surrounded by too many books he hadn't read, and too much silence he'd stopped noticing. His hands hovered over the keyboard. He pulled up Sophia's file again, not as her employer, but as a man trying to understand how someone could live so close and still feel oceans away. Her resume said she had studied psychology before switching to policy work. Her references were glowing, but it was the gap those 3 years, where nothing was listed, that stayed with him. What happened in those missing years? Thursday morning, she arrived late, not by much, but enough for him to notice. Her eyes were rimmed red, her steps slower. "Sorry," she mumbled, brushing past him without explanation. He followed her into the kitchen. "Tell me what's wrong." She didn't look at him. "You want the truth?" she asked, voice flat. "Yes, I used to be in love," she said. "Once." The words landed like stones on glass. He was kind at first, thoughtful, called me my star. But stars only shine when you keep them in the dark, you know. Marcus didn't breathe. He didn't hit me. Not exactly. But his words, they bruised. He made me believe I was small, that everything good in me only existed because he let it. She looked at Marcus then, and when I left everything. I had no money, no home. I cleaned bathrooms in a motel for 3 months just to pay for my mom's heart meds. Marcus felt something twist inside his chest. "I don't tell people this," she said, "because it makes them look at me like I'm broken." "You're not broken." She smiled sadly. "No, just haunted." Later, as she vacuumed the library, he stood outside the doorway, watching her. He saw the way she pushed past exhaustion, how she gripped the cord like it was the only thing tethering her to the present. He saw the ghost in her chest, not some tragic memory, but a living wound she carried quietly through other people's homes, never asking for pity, never expecting safety. He stepped inside the room. "You're safe here, Sophia." She turned off the vacuum, and for the first time, she let herself believe it. That weekend, he did something he hadn't done in years. He invited her to sit with him, not as an employee, as a person. He made tea awkwardly, burning his fingers in the process. She laughed, a real laugh, not polite, not measured, something light and golden and entirely hers. They sat on opposite ends of the long sofa, the air between them soft, sacred. "Do you still love him?" Marcus asked. "No," she said, without hesitation, "but I still carry what he left behind." He nodded. "I know what that's like." She tilted her head. "Did someone hurt you too?" He stared out the window. "My parents died in a car accident when I was 22. That was the first cut. After that, every friend, every relationship, they all wanted something. A piece of my money, a shortcut through my name. I stopped trusting before I even realized I was doing it." Sophia watched him closely. "You've built a castle," she said, "but you live in it alone." He turned to her, his voice quieter now. "Not entirely. Not anymore." They didn't touch. They didn't confess. They just sat there. Two people who carried wounds like locked boxes under their skin boxes. They never expected to open again. But that night, they unlocked a little, just enough. Some hearts break so quietly. No one hears the shatter. But healing begins the moment someone says, "I see the cracks, and I'm not afraid." Oh. Chapter 5. The proposal that wasn't. The flowers weren't for her, not officially. They sat in a tall crystal vase on the kitchen island, a rare pop of color in a house that was always monochrome and cold. Marcus had signed the delivery card for the team, claiming they were a thank you gesture for everyone who helped prep his home for a client dinner later that week. But Sophia knew he never bought flowers, and he never said thank you. Not like this. The truth was, something between them had shifted. It wasn't in grand gestures. It was in the quiet spaces. The way his voice softened when he asked how her mother was feeling. The way he lingered in the room a little longer after their conversations. The way she stopped pretending she was invisible. And now, the way her heart jumped when she found herself alone in the same room with him. Again and again. She couldn't deny it anymore. He was falling, and so was she. That Thursday, the sky outside the mansion was the color of bruised lilacs, and a storm whispered through the trees. Sophia had just finished polishing the dining room when Marcus appeared in the doorway, dressed down in a sweater, sleeves pushed up to his forearms. "Busy?" he asked. She looked up, cheeks warming. "Not particularly. I was hoping you'd sit with me a while." Sophia hesitated, but only for a second. They settled into the den, an untouched fire flickering softly behind the glass. Marcus poured 2 glasses of wine, not because he wanted to impress her, but because he didn't know how else to calm his hands. "I've been thinking," he began. "That sounds dangerous," she said with a small smile. He smiled too, but it faded quickly. "I've lived in this house for nearly 10 years, and I think last week was the first time it ever felt alive." Sophia tilted her head. "Why?" He looked at her, straight on. No armor, no deflection. "Because of you." Silence. Not uncomfortable, just still, like both their hearts were holding their breath. "I want something more," he said. "And I don't mean a relationship. Not yet. Not if you're not ready. I mean a partnership, something real." Sophia stared at him, wide-eyed. "I know you turned down the job," he continued, "and I respect that. But I've been thinking, maybe there's a way to build something together. Not just here, not just in this house, but something that matters." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. Sophia froze. Her mind screamed, "No, not now, not like this." He opened it slowly. Not a ring. A pendant? Inside, a tiny gold engraving, purpose over pride. Her words from their last conversation, etched in gold. "This isn't a proposal," he said quickly, seeing the panic in her eyes. "It's not a promise I expect you to keep. It's a hope, a symbol." Her throat tightened. "Marcus, He leaned back, lowering the box. "It's too much." "I know." "No," she whispered. "It's not that." He waited. She looked away. I just don't know who I am to you, she said softly. Sometimes you look at me like I'm everything, and other times I feel like I'm still just your cleaner. Marcus flinched, the pain raw. You've never been just the cleaner, Sophia. Then what am I? She whispered. He opened his mouth, closed it. Fear crawled back into his chest. What if he said the wrong thing? What if she walked out? And so, for once, Marcus Wellington, the man who built companies on confidence, stayed silent. And Sophia, heart aching, stood. I should get back to work. She turned, walked toward the door, and paused. Without turning around, she said quietly, I would have said yes, if you had asked for my heart instead of my help. Then she was gone. He sat alone with the pendant still open, the fire dying behind him, the words inside, glowing faintly in the fading light. Purpose over pride, and he realized he had chosen pride again. The next day, they were polite, professional, like nothing had happened. But the air between them was thicker now, charged with the echo of what neither of them had said. She cleaned the house like a woman trying to erase something. He watched her like a man afraid he'd ruined the one thing that ever felt real. And neither of them mentioned the box sitting on his nightstand. That night, she sat on the bus with her cheek pressed to the window. The city lights melting into tears, she refused to let fall. She wanted to believe he meant it, that the gift was more than an apology, that he saw her. But the ghost in her chest whispered all the doubts from the past. He pities you. He doesn't understand your world. He doesn't love you, not the real you, not the tired, broken, barely holding it together you. And so she clutched her bag tighter and pretended her heart wasn't breaking. Sometimes love knocks once, but fear keeps the door closed. Not because we don't want it, but because we're terrified it won't stay. Chapter 6. The One Who Stayed. Marcus Wellington didn't faint. He didn't stumble. He didn't break. He controlled. He calculated. He conquered. But that morning, as he stepped out of the shower, toweling steam from his face, the world tilted. The floor slipped, and the glass bottle of cologne he'd used every day for 9 years shattered on the tile beside him just as he did. Sophia was in the kitchen, slicing fruit for his breakfast. When she heard it, the crash, the silence, the nothing, she froze. Knife hovering over a strawberry, a cold grip of dread curling through her chest. Mr. Wellington, she called, cautious, stepping toward the hallway. No answer. She climbed the stairs, heart thudding in her ears. She knocked again. Nothing. Then, without permission or hesitation, she pushed open the door, and there he was, collapsed, soaked, half conscious on the marble floor, one hand bracing against the vanity like it was the only thing tethering him to the earth. Marcus, she breathed. His eyes fluttered open at her voice. I'm fine. He wasn't. She dropped to her knees, careful not to slip, and steadied his shoulders. His skin was clammy, his breath shallow. You need a hospital, she said firmly. No, just a minute. Please. She didn't argue. Not yet. Instead, she wrapped a towel around him, helped him sit up against the wall, and placed a hand over his heart. Not romantically, not dramatically, but with the quiet care of someone who knew panic when she saw it. I'm staying, she whispered. He looked at her, then really looked, and something in his expression cracked. Not pain, not pride. Something else, fear. Sophia stayed by his side until the doctor arrived. David had come too. Called from Marcus's emergency list, dehydration. The doctor said, after a quick exam, exhaustion, elevated blood pressure, probably stress-induced. He's been ignoring the signs. David rubbed his temples. That sounds about right. Marcus lay on the sofa, eyes closed, wrapped in a blanket that didn't seem to warm him. Sophia stood in the corner, arms folded, unsure if she belonged. He hasn't been sleeping, David murmured to her when the doctor stepped away. He's been working 16-hour days again, barely eating, pushing too hard. For what? She asked quietly. David gave her a look. Will you? That night, she stayed. Not because she was paid to, not because she had to, because she couldn't leave him like that. Marcus, the man who held his world with white-knuckled fists, had finally let go, and when he did, she was the one who caught him. He woke around 2. The fire was low in the den, and there she was, curled up on the end of the sofa, arms folded beneath her head, still in her work clothes. Sophia? His voice was rough. She stirred, blinked, sat up quickly. Sorry, I didn't mean to fall asleep. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. You stayed. You were alone. He stared at her for a long moment, and then he said, the thing he'd never admitted to anyone, not even David. I'm scared. She moved closer, not touching, just there. Of what? Of not knowing how to live without control. She nodded, gently. That's what trauma does. It tricks us into thinking safety means silence, but that's not living. Marcus, I don't know how else to survive. You stop surviving, she whispered, and you start letting someone stay. They didn't talk for the rest of the night. They didn't need to. She sat beside him until his breathing slowed, until his hand found hers accidentally, hesitantly, until the fire died out. And when morning broke through the windows in soft streaks of silver, they were still sitting there, not lovers, not employer and maid, just 2 people who had forgotten how to be held and were learning it all over again. Marcus didn't go into work that week. He canceled meetings, delayed deadlines, let the world spin without him. David texted twice a day. Still breathing, Marcus replied. Barely, but better. Because Sophia stayed. She brought him soup in silence. She let him nap on the sofa and read him parts of her thesis when he couldn't sleep. She told him about her mother's most recent test results. I think she's turning a corner, Sophia said one night. The medication's working. She's even talking about coming to visit. That's good news, Marcus said softly. She smiled. It is. He watched the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her mom, the way her voice softened, and he wondered what it would feel like to be loved by someone like that. Steady, true, the kind of love that stayed when everyone else left. By Friday, he was better, physically, anyway, but something deeper had changed. He wasn't just grateful that Sophia stayed. He was undone by it, because no one stayed. Not since his parents, not since the betrayals. Everyone always left, but she didn't. And now he couldn't stop asking himself one question. What do you do when the only person who sees you is the one you were never supposed to love? That night, she brought him tea without asking. He didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, he whispered, "You're the only one who didn't run." She looked at him, her voice a whisper. That's because I knew what it felt like to be the one no one stayed for. They sat in the quiet again. 2 people, bound not by romance, yet but by recognition, by the weight of being misunderstood, by the ache of being strong for too long, by the miracle of not having to explain anymore. It's not always the people who say, "I love you," the loudest. Sometimes it's the ones who stay when everything else falls apart. Chapter 7. The Woman Who Sees Me. He had never taken anyone there before. Not David. Not old friends. Not even the women he used to call girlfriends. Back when relationships were performances and trust was a contract. But that Sunday morning, as the sky cracked open with sunlight after a week of rain, Marcus turned to Sophia and said softly, "Come with me, just for a drive." She hesitated, then nodded. No questions, no expectations, just a yes. They didn't speak much during the first hour of the drive. The city gave way to hills and sleepy towns with peeling paint and gas stations that hadn't updated their signs since 1994. Marcus's fingers gripped the steering wheel harder than they needed to, but Sophia didn't press. She just let the silence stretch between them like a bridge being built, plank by plank. After a long pause, he finally said, "I grew up in a house with yellow shutters and creaky floorboards. My mom baked bread on Sundays. My dad sang Sinatra while mowing the lawn." She turned to look at him. His eyes were somewhere else. "They died in a car crash when I was 22, on their way to visit me. My first product had just launched. I thought I was invincible. I didn't even answer their last call because I was in a meeting." Sophia didn't respond. She just placed her hand gently on the center console, palm open, resting, not grabbing, not demanding, just there. An invitation, if he wanted it. He took it, and they drove the rest of the way hand in hand. The house was still there, tired, but standing. The yellow shutters faded to cream. The porch railing bent like it had aged without permission. Marcus parked across the street and stared for a long time. Sophia waited, then quietly asked, "When's the last time you came?" 15 years ago. I stood on that porch, turned the key, and couldn't go inside." He let the words sit between them like a confession. "I told myself I'd moved on, but I think I've just been pretending I didn't need to come back." Sophia stepped out of the car, took a deep breath, and walked toward the gate like she belonged there. Like maybe if she stepped onto that porch, she could carry some of what he still couldn't. Inside, the air smelled like dust and memory, furniture covered in sheets, sunlight filtering through cracked blinds. Time had passed without asking for permission. Marcus stood in the doorway of what used to be the dining room. "This is where they celebrated everything," he said. "Birthdays, report cards, new shoes. They made everything feel like it mattered." Sophia smiled, soft and reverent. "That's rare." He nodded. "I think I've spent my whole life trying to rebuild that feeling with money." She looked around the quiet, crumbling house. "Money can't give you this." "No," he said, "but maybe people can." They found an old photo album in a cardboard box under the stairs. Sophia sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, flipping through pages while Marcus hovered behind her, half embarrassed, half dazed. There was a picture of him at age 10, missing teeth, holding a soccer trophy twice his size. Sophia chuckled. "You had a bowl cut." He groaned. "It was the 90s. She turned another page. They're his parents, young, laughing. His mother's hand on his father's chest. Mid-laugh, Sophia's voice turned soft. They loved each other. You can see it. Marcus knelt beside her. They loved me too. And after they were gone, no one else ever really saw me." Sophia met his eyes. "I do." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Some moments are too sacred to be interrupted by romance. That afternoon, Marcus stood in his childhood bedroom, the old twin bed still pressed against the wall, shelves lined with dusty trophies and comic books. Sophia walked in, ran her fingers across the bookshelf. "You wanted to be an astronaut." He laughed until I realized I got motion sickness on elevators. She smiled, then turned serious. "You've become something bigger. Maybe not in space, but here you built a world." His voice dropped. "But does any of it matter if I built it alone?" Sophia stepped forward. "You're not alone anymore." They left at sunset. Back in the car, Marcus was quieter than usual. His hand found hers again. No hesitation this time. When they reached the city, Sophia spoke. "Thank you for bringing me there. That wasn't just a house. That was your heart." He nodded, eyes ahead. "And you didn't run." "I never do." Later that night, back in the mansion, Marcus poured them both tea. They sat on opposite ends of the long sofa again. But this time, something between them had shifted. Not because of a moment, because of a memory shared, because he had taken her to the place he'd hidden from everyone else, because she had seen him and stayed. Before she left for the evening, Sophia paused by the door. You don't need to be everything, Marcus. You just need to be real. And for once, he felt like he was. To be loved is one thing, but to be seen, to be known in the quiet, unfiltered corners of your life is something else entirely. Chapter 8. Breaking the Promise. It began with a cough, not loud, not alarming, just a short breath caught in Marcus's throat during a board meeting. He waved it off. Too much coffee, dry air, not enough sleep. But 2 days later, it hadn't stopped. By the time Sophia noticed, it had deepened, raspy and lingering, curling at the edge of his voice like smoke from something burning unseen. Have you seen a doctor? She asked gently. Standing in the doorway of his office, Marcus looked up from his laptop, eyes glassy. I'm fine. You're not fine. You haven't slept in days. I've been through worse. Marcus, she said, stepping closer. That's not something to be proud of. He didn't respond because she was right. But pride has a voice louder than truth. And Marcus had lived with pride longer than he'd lived with hope. That evening, Sophia made soup. He didn't ask her to. She just appeared with it in a mug, steam curling up like incense. Thank you, he said, voice hoarse. You don't have to do this alone, she whispered. But Marcus didn't answer because somewhere deep inside, he didn't believe her. Not really. The next morning, he collapsed, not entirely, just onto the edge of the bed, as though his body had finally caught up to the truth he'd been running from. Sophia rushed to him. Again, worried, steady, terrified. Let me call someone. No doctors. Why? His jaw tightened. Because last time I got a diagnosis, he said quietly. They died. Sophia froze. He looked up at her then, pale and tired and broken in a way she hadn't seen since the day he showed her his childhood home. I was the one who paid for the car service, he said. I wanted them to be comfortable, and the brakes failed. Oh, Marcus, she whispered. I sent them to their deaths. You didn't know, but I should have. I had the money. I had the means. I could have checked. I could have protected them. She knelt before him. I already have.